The human body is incredibly efficient. We are constantly bombarded by numerous stimuli, yet we are able to respond appropriately and simultaneously. Two systems allow us to sense and respond to changing external and internal environments while maintaining homeostasis. These are the nervous and endocrine systems. This program will provide an introduction to the nervous and endocrine systems and how these systems regulate physiological processes in humans. You will learn about the structure and function of the neuron and the myelin sheath. You will also gain an appreciation of how the endocrine system coordinates other organs and tissues through hormonal action and feedback. Finally, the biological basis of multiple sclerosis, a debilitating neurological disorder, will also be explored.
So, what's with the recorder?
We're doing a shoot.
A shoot? Were you with the Audiovisual Club?
Not really, it's for a biology project.
You're doing this for biology?
Sure, why not?
It's different. So, what's the project about?
Well, we're recording people's reactions to different things they sense.
And then what?
Well, then we describe what the endocrine and nervous systems are doing by analyzing their reactions.
That's cool. Well, I hope it works out.
All right.
Did you like the research?
Yeah, part of it.
The dance part of it? The laser show was neat. Good. I'm sure that the library part was also fascinating. What did you learn about the nervous system?
The nervous system allows us to sense and respond to our internal and external environments.
And?
And it maintains homeostasis.
Homeostasis. Can you define that for me?
Maintaining a steady state within the body.
Good. Can you give me an example?
Yeah. This scale is kind of like the body. Right now it's balanced and at equilibrium. But let's say we take one weight off one end. Now the scale or body is out of equilibrium.
What happens next?
The nervous system tries to restore that equilibrium.
Very good. Can you give me a real-life example of how this would work?
Say I'm thirsty. My nervous system senses that my body needs more water, so then I drink liquids to restore my normal fluid balance.
When water loss has reached 1% of body weight, the sensation of thirst is experienced. The thirst center of the hypothalamus is stimulated by high salt concentrations in the blood. This causes us to respond by drinking water and prompts the kidneys to conserve water and regulate solute concentrations.
Now, let's take a look at the structures that the nervous system uses to maintain balance.
The nervous system is divided into the central and peripheral nervous systems. The central nervous system consists of the brain and spinal cord. It is here that sensory information is interpreted and a signal for action begins. The nerves extending from the brain and spinal cord make up the peripheral nervous system. These nerves transmit signals between the central nervous system and the rest of the body. The peripheral nervous system is divided into two branches. One branch consists of sensory nerves. These carry signals from internal and external receptors to the spinal cord and the brain. The other branch consists of motor nerves, which carry signals from the central nervous system to the effectors, muscles and glands. The motor nerves are divided into the somatic nerves, which stimulate our voluntary muscles, and the autonomic nervous system, which stimulates or inhibits involuntary processes, such as circulation, digestion, and respiration. The autonomic system is further divided into the sympathetic and parasympathetic branches. the sympathetic branch prepares the body for action, such as running away from a dangerous situation. The parasympathetic branch restores equilibrium and conserves energy after a period of action or stress.
You said earlier that one of the functions of the nervous system was to sense and respond to the internal and external environments. Do you have an example?
Let's take a look at the video we made at the laser show. This illustrates how people are able to sense and respond to their external environment. The nervous system conducts signals from sensory receptors to the central nervous system. In the dancer's case, sound receptors are stimulated, and sensory nerves take this information to her brain. The brain then integrates this information. In this example, the music is sensed, interpreted, and her response is dancing. Of course, she couldn't dance if it wasn't for her motor skills. Signals from her brain are carried by motor nerves to the appropriate muscles to allow her to dance. The amazing thing about the nervous system is that it is continually receiving and responding to a great variety of stimuli. The dancers receive light, sound, as well as other stimuli. The brain makes sense of it all and initiates responses accordingly.
Oh, I understand how we detect our external environment. We use our 5 senses, right?
Right.
Then how do we detect our internal environment?
Good question. We have many sensory receptors in the internal organs. For example, we have sensory receptors that detect blood pressure, body temperature, and the levels of the many chemicals within the body. Also, the endocrine system helps the nervous system to regulate the internal environment. Now, let's take a closer look at the endocrine system.
The endocrine system consists of several glands throughout the body. These glands produce chemical messengers called hormones, which are secreted into the bloodstream and are taken to all body cells. Only specific target cells respond to the various hormones. The pituitary gland is called the master gland because it produces hormones that control other glands. The hypothalamus in the brain controls the pituitary. Metabolic rate and calcium levels are controlled by the thyroid gland. Hormones that help us deal with stress are produced by the adrenal glands. Blood glucose levels are controlled by the pancreas as well as several other endocrine glands. Female sex hormones are produced by the ovaries, and male sex hormones are produced by the testes.
Look at this, would you?
Yeah, it looks like something out of a science fiction movie.
I see you found my model of an endocrine gland.
Yeah, it looks like some sort of mad scientist creation.
Okay, I'm not a designer, but this gives us an idea of how the endocrine system works. Who would like to start explaining?
Well, you mentioned endocrine glands, so I'll give it a shot. The balloon represents an endocrine gland. And the blue liquid coming out of the balloon, or endocrine gland, must be a hormone.
Right.
Go ahead.
The liquid surrounding the balloon would be the extracellular fluid, and this tube would represent the blood vessels into which the hormones move.
And what will happen next?
The blood vessels will absorb and transport the hormone through the body to the target cells. And the target cells would be represented by these colored blobs.
Exactly.
So, how do the hormones recognize their specific target cells?
Well, let's use these models to illustrate that. Let's say this was a hormone. Would this be able to fit into any of these cells?
Probably only the matching sites.
Right.
Okay.
So, this hormone would only be able to go with this cell, right?
Exactly. Cells have specific receptor sites for specific hormones. For example, the cells in the thyroid gland, they have receptor sites for thyroid-stimulating hormone, but not for glucagon, a hormone produced by the pancreas.
So target cells have specific receptors for certain hormones.
Exactly.
Oh, okay.
Now, some hormones bind to the outside of the cell and activate the cell to produce enzymes. Other hormones go right into the cell and activate genes to produce enzymes.
Okay, I get it.
Now, in this model, it seems the hormone is continually dripping and leaking. Is that how it happens in our body?
Actually, no. Hormones are produced in very small amounts and only when they are needed. Hormone production is controlled by two methods. One way is by neural pathways. In this method, the hypothalamus is going to sense that a hormone is getting to be too low in the blood. At this point, it will send messages to the pituitary to start producing a certain hormone.
So the master gland has its master too. In this case, the hypothalamus in the brain.
Exactly. Now, the other way in which hormone production is controlled is by negative feedback loops. A negative feedback loop is when there's a stimulus. That stimulus will cause a response. That response will then decrease the stimulus. Being hungry is a stimulus that produces the response of eating. Eating will then decrease the stimulus.
A hypothetical hormone A controls the level of Q in the blood. High levels of Q stimulate the secretion of A. As the level of A increases, it leads to decreased levels of Q. As the level of Q decreases, it inhibits the production of A. This is an example of negative feedback.
So, how does the nervous system communicate with other cells?
The nervous system uses electrochemical signals which are transmitted from one cell to the next. To understand how the nervous system works, we need to examine the cells that make up the nervous system.
Those would be the neurons.
Some of them. But before we get into the neurons, let's review the structures of the nervous system. What would the celery jelly represent?
The celery jelly would be the brain.
Right. Then what would this celery bundle represent?
Celery bundle would be the spinal cord.
That's right. How about these stalks of celery? What would they be?
The celery stalks would represent the nerves of the peripheral nervous system.
That's right.
Then the thin slices of celery would represent the neurons.
That's it.
Let me see if I got this. The brain is a mass of neurons, and the spinal cord contains bundles of neurons, which are called nerves.
You're on the right track. Now, let's take a closer look at neurons. May I borrow your arm?
What for?
Oh, I need as a model to write on. You see, neurons have three parts to them. A cell body, and from the cell body we have the dendrites, and from the opposite side of the cell body we have a long extension called the axon.
So that's it. Cell body, dendrites, and axon.
Not quite. From the axon we have branches that branches off. They are called the axon terminals.
Neurons are the structural and functional units of the nervous system. They have three basic features: the cell body, dendrites, and axons. Dendrites are the fibers that branch off the cell body. Their function is to receive signals from other neurons or sensory receptors. Dendrites convert these stimuli into electrical signals called nerve impulses and convey them to the cell body. The cell body is the integration center where electrical signals from the dendrites converge and an impulse is conducted along the axon. The axon is a thin fiber that extends outward from the cell body. It carries the nerve impulse away from the cell body to the axon terminals. Axon terminals contain chemicals called neurotransmitters that are released when a nerve impulse reaches them. Some axons are surrounded by other nervous system cells called glial cells. One type of glial cell is the Schwann cell. These cells wrap around the axon, forming fatty, myelin sheaths at intervals along its length. A small gap occurs between each Schwann cell where the axon is exposed. This gap is called a node of Ranvier. Nodes of Ranvier allow the nerve impulse to travel by jumping from node to node. Nerve impulse conduction occurs much faster on myelinated axons than on axons that lack myelin. There are three types of neurons: sensory neurons, interneurons, and motor neurons. Sensory neurons carry information about the external and internal environments from sensory receptors to the central nervous system. Interneurons are located within the brain and the spinal cord. They connect sensory neurons with motor neurons. Motor neurons carry nerve impulses from the central nervous system to the effectors, muscles, and glands.
So what kind of neuron would your arm represent?
A happy one.
I would say either a motor or sensory neuron.
What is the axon missing?
A myelin sheath.
That's right. Victoria, add some myelin to the axon. Okay. I'll put one down here. And another one just a little higher. Good. Now that axon is myelinated. Now, what would each sock represent?
Schwann cell?
Right. How about the space between each Schwann cell?
That would be a node of Ranvier.
Exactly. What would be the effect of removing the myelin?
Oh, it would probably slow down the transmission of the nerve impulse.
Good answer. There is an illness in which the myelin degenerates. It's called multiple sclerosis. Let's find out more.
MS, or multiple sclerosis, literally translated means multiple scars. It is a disease of the central nervous system, which consists of the brain and the spinal cord. And what happens in MS is there's a cover or an insulation around the nerve called the myelin sheath. And in the disease of multiple sclerosis, this sheath becomes inflamed and may be replaced by scar tissue. And thus there are some problems transmitting signals from the brain to the rest of the body.
What are the symptoms of MS?
There are a number of different symptoms, and people experience different symptoms at different times in different orders. There's fatigue is a very common one. Weakness, numbness, tingling, visual disturbances. Sometimes people have double vision or blurred vision. There's also some depression comes along with it, mainly because it is a chronic disease.
Why does the destruction of myelin result in these symptoms?
Well, because the brain, which sends all of the signals to the rest of the body, like the brain, for example, will tell your hand to pick up something. And if the nerve is damaged, or the surrounding insulation of the nerve is damaged, the message doesn't go through, or it may be slowed down. It may get through, but it might just be a little slow.
What treatments are available?
There are a number of different treatments. There are a lot of unproven treatments that are being researched at the time. We can treat a lot of the symptoms with medication. We can treat the fatigue. We can deal a lot with the visual problems. We do give steroids for people in acute attacks. And we give this steroid, it's called Solumedrol. We give it intravenously, 5 doses over a 10-day period. And what that does, or should do, is decrease the inflammation in the myelin and relieves the symptoms, and it speeds up the recovery a little bit. It certainly doesn't cure anything, but it speeds up recovery.
How has it affected your family life?
My family life has changed drastically. I'm now a single parent. I have 2 sons that are teenage, and neither one of them really understand the disease. And they're at the age, preteen and teen, where it's very difficult for them to understand what it is how this disease affects my life, why it is I can't go skiing, why it is Mom's tired. So MS has affected my marriage. It has affected my mother, my brother, my sister, and even my ex-in-laws, I would say, to a certain degree.
How has it affected your work life?
Well, I'm not working out of the home right now because this illness takes away your energy and leaves you feeling tired a lot of the time. That's a very prominent symptom.
What would you tell the general public about how to treat a person with multiple sclerosis?
Just that it affects your central nervous system, and that it's not something that you can catch.
What advice would you give someone recently diagnosed with MS?
I think just living day to day, primarily, not looking too far down the road and thinking, oh, I can't do this anymore, I can't do that anymore, because that's, maybe today I can't, but maybe next week I can.
What coping mechanisms did you use to help yourself?
Keeping as positive an attitude as you can.
Multiple sclerosis, or MS, attacks the myelin sheath around the body of the nerve and destroys the nerve's ability to conduct impulses. When that happens, there is also a seepage of blood from the surrounding vessels, and blood pools around the damage or lesion. Until now, doctors haven't been able to look into the living brain, and that's presented tremendous problems in understanding MS.
In the past, you'd wait until the patient died, and then you would literally cut the patient open and look at the tissue to see the damage that had been done, and then try and work out how that had evolved. It was hopelessly limited. I mean, you really had no idea of the dynamics of the disease and the sequence of events that caused the damage itself.
Now that MRI imaging is available, doctors and researchers are able to more accurately track the progression of the disease. Gadolinium, a highly magnetic element, is used to magnify the number of MS lesions in the brain. This imager can't see the effect of the damage from MS so long as the gadolinium is moving in the bloodstream. But the moment it comes to a halt in a pocket of blood that's leaked from a vessel, the changed behavior of the surrounding hydrogen atoms shows up deep inside the brain. This is where the MS is attacking the brain. These are magnetic resonance images of blood seeping into the brain. The patient may not even be aware that an attack is occurring. Autopsies have shown that the lesions characteristic of MS are found in the brains of about 0.2% of the general populace who have not experienced any obvious effects of neurological illness. The prevalence of MS is not the same the world over. In fact, research has revealed a predominance of multiple sclerosis cases in countries more distant from the equator than in equatorial regions, a disease of progressively severe attacks and remissions. Multiple sclerosis is more prevalent in women, affecting 3 females for every 2 males.
I hope they haven't hyped this one up, because we've waited a long time for it, and this is the first real breakthrough that we've had.
Jean McLeod, a person who has had MS for more than 20 years, knows she won't benefit from a new drug that has been hailed as a breakthrough in the treatment of multiple sclerosis. Beta interferon, sold as betaferon, has been shown to benefit those who've recently contracted the disease, reducing the number and severity of their relapses. But the drug is costly, approximately $18,000 per year per patient.
Investing in a new medicine, we want to ensure that it is focused, that it's targeted to the group of people who are most likely to gain most benefit over as long a period as possible.
This is a Christmas party in Glasgow for people with MS. There are an estimated 80,000 people in Britain with the disease. Slightly under half have the type which could be treated with betaferon. But since it's the first drug to offer help in the treatment of MS, those with the condition say cost shouldn't prevent it from being prescribed.
If you're willing to take the risk to take beta interferon, then you should be allowed to take that chance. It's your body that's been destroyed by this illness.
I'm getting desperate. My condition's getting worse, and up to now there's been nothing, absolutely nothing.
With shrinking healthcare dollars, some doctors and public health officials feel that beta interferon shouldn't be prescribed until further research has been done on its long-term effects.
I see you drew a diagram of the neuron slide. Your diagrams are like good modern art. Can you interpret it for me?
Sure. This is called a presynaptic neuron because the neuron comes before the synapse.
And the synapse is this gap between the 2 neurons.
Right.
What is this neuron called?
It's called a postsynaptic neuron.
Synapses are sites where a lot of activity takes place. Let's take a look at this diagram. This here represents the axon terminal of a presynaptic neuron. Any idea about its role?
Doesn't it release chemicals called neurotransmitters which diffuse across the synapse?
That's right.
And the neurotransmitters, don't they transmit the nerve impulse to a postsynaptic neuron?
Exactly.
So, how many neurons does one neuron synapse with?
One neuron can synapse with as few as one neuron or with thousands of neurons.
It's possible that neurons can form millions of interconnections with each other, but most do not make direct contact. They are separated by small gaps called synapses. The number of neurons that one neuron can communicate with varies from a single neuron to thousands of neurons.
Now I want you to build motor neurons, sensor neurons, and interneurons, and then connect them in the right order. I bet you this is a sensory neuron.
Yep, and it's located outside of the central nervous system. Its job is to carry messages from the receptors to the central nervous system.
And this is an interneuron located within the central nervous system. It receives a message from the sensory neuron, interprets it, and passes it on to the motor neuron.
And the motor neuron takes messages away from the central nervous system to the muscles and glands.
Very good. You just described a neural pathway like the one in your video. Let's review what we have learned. The nervous and endocrine systems allow us to sense and respond to the internal and external environments.
The nervous system is divided into the central nervous system and the peripheral nervous system. The peripheral nervous system is further divided into the sensory and motor divisions. Now, the motor division has two branches, the somatic and autonomic. The autonomic is then divided into the sympathetic and parasympathetic system. The basic structure of the nervous system is the neuron. Now, the endocrine system consists of several glands.
And these glands produce hormones that affect specific cells or tissues. All the components of the nervous system work together to sense and respond to stimuli and to maintain homeostasis.
You've just learned about the functions of the nervous and endocrine systems in general. In future programs, we'll be looking at the specific structures and how they work.